a few moments from now, we are expecting the Indian Prime Minister and the US President to address the media that's waiting at Hyderabad House. But let's give you a sense of the unprecedented scenes that have taken place in the national capital on this day when India is saying Namaste Obama. Who could have ever imagined the Indian Prime Minister walking in a garden, having tea with the US President in front of cameras? That's also what's happened. Also remember the hug that was given at the airport when the Indian Prime Minister went to receive the US President. We've also had other photo opportunities. The picture you see on your right-hand side is a Constituent Assembly debate being presented to the US Prime Minister, who, remember, is a Republic Day guest. So lots of Obama moments that we've had, including that walk that the two leaders had across the lawns of Hyderabad House. Now, of course, apart from all those atmospherics and the photo ops, we do believe that the two sides will be signing on to a defense deal, as well as ironing out the irritants in the Indo-US civil nuclear transfer. So we do believe that there is significant movement that has been made on both these issues by the two sides, and we're expecting much more, including we're expecting some agreement on sharing of espionage technology, of intelligence sharing. We're also expecting some agreements on counterterrorism, on terror emanating from Pakistan. We're being told that the two sides will be looking at a variety of issues. This isn't an engagement that now centers around any one single issue. So the joint statement, as well as the fact that the two leaders will be speaking there in a short while from now, does suggest that they will be talking on a variety of issues. That the talks actually began at 1 o'clock. That's when the US President went into Hyderabad House. We're now at 4:30, and we expect any time now the US President and the Indian Prime Minister to emerge and to give us a sense of what has happened. Sources, as you can see, telling us that information being shared by the two sides on a variety of issues, including, as I said, the renewal of the Defense Framework Agreement for another 10 years. The two sides have also been looking at common interests in the region, including in Afghanistan, and co-production under the Defense Technology Agreement as part of the push for Make in India will also be very much on the table. We're being told any time now, is what my reporter is just telling me, the two leaders are expected to emerge and speak to us. Is that a good sign when a meeting takes place for so long, or is it a bad sign, Meera Shankar? Is that, when the two leaders start their conversation at 1 o'clock and we're waiting for a statement which was supposed to be at 3, we're now almost 4:35. Is that a good or a bad sign?
I think they've got a lot to talk about. They've met only a couple of months ago, so in the interim,
yes,
quite a bit has happened in the relationship.
Yes.
It's unfrozen. You have the nuclear issue moving. Whether it'll reach fruition, we'll know in a little while. The defense cooperation agreement is being updated. Then you're looking, in fact, you were talking earlier about whether this is a transactional relationship, yes, or a broader relationship. I would say that the signal that comes from President Obama accepting the invitation to be the chief guest at India's Republic Day is that they're looking at the relationship in a more strategic way. Because otherwise, the need to balance vis-a-vis China and vis-a-vis Pakistan would always have been a factor in any US decision with regard to such an invitation. And so I think the fact that President Obama shifted the date of his State of the Union address, for which he actually faced criticism within the US, saying, he's wasting our time to have a photo opportunity in front of the Taj or whatever. So I think that the signal that emanates from the fact that they have chosen to meet so soon after their Washington summit, and the fact that Prime Minister Modi chose to invite President Obama, and this was accepted, I think it's signaling a far more serious engagement, and the fact that both countries are taking a strategic view of the relationship. Now, that doesn't mean that issues won't be there. There will be issues. There will also be an effort by both countries to jostle for advantage in the bilateral relationship. That's part of the game.
Yes.
But what it means is that the two countries will try to focus on the larger picture, will look at other issues taking that larger picture in mind.
Right.
Now, on economic issues, you may have differences because of the different levels of development of the two countries. India is a developing country which needs to keep open the potential to develop in many sectors, because our development path lies ahead of us.
Sure.
The US is a developed and mature economy. So the perspective that we have on many issues is from our own economic vantage point, and finding middle ground on some of these issues may not be that easy, but there can be practical ways forward. Like on IPR, you've seen the company Gilead has licensed an HIV drug to an Indian company. Now this will be at different price points to the international price point, and the company can also sell in the international market. So the way forward in many of these issues is like the nuclear deal, not on an ideological platform. Will India change its laws? No, we can't change our laws, etc. But it is, how do we pragmatically and from a business point of view find a way forward, given that our vantage point is different.
I see finally the delegates now emerging, so we expect the statement anytime now. Arun Jaitley, Sushma Swaraj earlier, Jai Shankar, Piyush Goyal, these were all part of the delegation from the Indian side, all emerging there out of that meeting that has just taken place at Hyderabad House. Sujata Singh, Foreign Secretary. So we expect the two leaders anytime now to be coming in there and speaking to us, and we expect it to be a relatively brief statement. We don't expect it to be an extended statement. The joint statement will perhaps, which will be then distributed later, will perhaps amplify what the two leaders have had to say.
I think the talks, delegation level talks have been about 1 hour, which is absolutely normal, I think,
right.
Because before that the lunch went on a little more than expected. Then there was a chai pe charcha moment, and that went on maybe for half an hour. So I think the actual talks have been just about 1 hour, from about 3:15 to now, which is perfectly normal.
That's sort of normal.
Yes.
The
yes.
talks,
Can we rule out the earlier talks? They were necessary, I think, for laying the ground to...
No, but for
subject
example,
matter
on the civil nuclear deal, the two sides have been talking to each other over the last couple of weeks. There's been a lot of, there's been a lot of backroom negotiations which have been going on, and what we are hoping to see is the culmination of a lot of that, which has already taken place over the last couple of weeks. So this, in a sense, is the final act to what is, and after this, frankly, in his visit to India, ceremonials take over. That's really when you will have the ceremonial aspect of the relationship taking over, the President's banquet, tomorrow the Republic Day parade, and of course the at-home that the President will have. And Mr. Obama generally in the next 48 hours after this will be more, and the Man Ki Baat that he's having with the Indian Prime Minister over radio. So there'll be more of that. But I think this is the crucial moment in terms of the actual sort of the substance of the...
this is the actual outcome.
This is the actual outcome. This is the final outcome of the visit.
The recording of Man Ki Baat is...
And we're just waiting now for the two leaders as they emerge and to speak out of their room. So the two leaders expected to emerge at any time. Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi and US President Barack Obama. Akbaruddin is the MEA spokesperson who will introduce the two leaders as they emerge there and speak to the gathering of media persons. It's interesting because in the Indo-Pak context, we often sort of hype up expectations. I think with the Indo-US relationship, it's become easier in that sense. It's less fraught, certainly, than the Indo-Pak equation, which Mr. Parthasarathy, you've been such an intrinsic part in that turbulent period in the 1990s. So there's a shift in the way in which the relationship has been seen over the years, and the Indo-US relationship to that extent has matured much more, you'd say, than the previous relationships that have taken place.
Absolutely. If you look back, as Professor Chinoy was saying sometime earlier, in the 1971 war, the US sent an aircraft carrier to threaten us.
That's right.
And look where we've reached. So, as the British statesman proclaimed, there are no permanent friends or permanent enemies. There are only countries only have permanent interests.
Yes.
So I think the fact is that and the world order has been in flux since the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union collapsed.
Yes.
You are now getting a world order which is fashioning its own new balances of power.
Right.
The Americans have recognized that in that balance of power in Asia, India has a role to play play, and given the fact it's a democracy, there is much they can find in common with us.
Right.
That is the takeaway. Balancing China to the east, dealing with terrorism to our west. We are virtually on the same sort of plate. We can have differences.
We're not allies, though. We're not allies, we're partners. We need to make that distinction.
An ally will take the other for granted. As partners, it will have to be a consultative process, but generally in a direction to be as far as possible on the same plane.
But have we over the time, Meera Shankar, and you'll know this better, sort of had lost opportunities? Because there was a feeling until 2011 in particular, the relationship had sort of matured, and then there was a period of 2012-13 which was seen as a more difficult period in the relationship. So is the relationship still hostage to external factors?
I think there were moments of lost opportunity historically in Indo-US relations. I think with the collapse of the Cold War in the late 80s, I think, and the opening up of the Indian economy, the improvement began in the economic relationship, but the political relationship continued to be seen through the Cold War prism for far longer than was warranted by the new international factors at play. 2012 and 2013, certainly, I think the domestic weaknesses of both governments really, in a sense, allowed a drift to overcome the relationship. Here, our government was bogged down in domestic scandals, didn't seem to have the political will to craft consensus on difficult issues. In the US, President Obama had gotten to election mode with the presidential election coming up, and then you had all these crises emerging, which occupied the US attention, whether it was Libya, whether it was Egypt with the Arab Spring. So you had, in a sense, both a diversion of interest and priorities and a moment where weaknesses or other priorities of governments began to take attention away from the India-US bilateral relationship.
But I'd like to add one important point to that, and I think that is the recognition of India's role in South Asia. And I think that is a very crucial recognition that America finally is willing to give, because this has always been a very contentious point between India and the US, and the US has tended to absolutely downgrade the hyphenation also because of the hyphenation of India and Pakistan. They've not been willing to accept. Today you see a completely different approach, and I think that if you see
So you won't see the same ups and downs, you believe, in the relationship that we've seen over the years?
I think
you believe that there will be a more consistent plane that we will operate at? And I come back to it, is it now reached that stage of complete trust, where irrespective of what happens globally, irrespective of domestic compulsions in India and the United States?
I think that Prime Minister Modi's statement on South Asia, inviting the South Asian leaders for his swearing in, his primacy that he is giving to South Asia is a great boost in this matter. And the seriousness with which he's approaching South Asia is a tremendous boost, because he's showing that he's willing to, the success of his visit to Nepal, and his visit to Bhutan, and now Sushma Swaraj to Bangladesh. I think all these have given the US a great deal of confidence in that. Together with what's happening in Pakistan.
Mr. Parthasarathy was a little more skeptical. You don't believe that the relationship will continue at an even plane?
It will have to involve close consultations. For example, in Bangladesh, the fact of the matter is that over the years, the US has not been friendly to Sheikh Hasina. They've been closer with Khalida, and worse still with the Jamaat Islami in Bangladesh. So I think a very close process of consultations is required to ensure we are on the same page. Neither should take the other for granted.
But they're prepared to do it now. They weren't prepared to do it even 2 years ago.
That's it.
Even last year they were not prepared.
Is there a sense that the two leaders have realized that you can't take each other for granted, that there are domestic compulsions in this country, which we have been reflected in the delay that the Indo-US civil nuclear deal has taken? I mean, is there a recognition in America that you're dealing with a democracy? This is a country where there are pulls and pressure. This is not, a country of the Middle East. This is not a satellite, a client state that you're going to have. This is not certainly Pakistan. India is a very, very different country, and therefore the US hasn't learned to respect that element of Indian democracy.
I think it'll be a constant process. I
Yeah.
don't think that with any
Nothing is for
country you
granted.
can take the relationship
can't.
for granted
Right.
and that it will automatically follow a smooth trajectory. I think there has to be a constant process of engagement and consultation.
Right.
And I think that the US understands that India is a democracy, but they are far more cognizant of their own political pressures.
Right.
And because of the asymmetries of power,
Right.
generally used to other countries accepting their point of view.
Right.
Now in India, that is very, very difficult because we are such a heterogeneous democracy with so many pulls and pressures.
Right.
So I think the US is beginning to learn. Let me say, I won't say it's learned fully, but it is beginning to learn that, you know, beyond a point you can't go. So this was my advice actually to both the businesses when they would say, you know, there's so much opposition on the nuclear or on this or that. And I would say, how do we handle it? I said, exactly the way you would handle it in America. You'll have your interest groups there, you'll have local communities who will oppose, you will work with them, you will have an outreach program, you will have a political outreach program, you will have a corporate social responsibility program. Please understand, be in India for the long haul, and India is like the US, you will have to have the patience to work our systems. And similarly with the US officials and political leadership, I always said that, work with India. If you actually make public statements which are threatening or forceful, it has the reverse impact.
So you believe that's had an impact? It's taken a while.
I think it's a process. I think it would be a bit vain to say that it's had an impact, but it's a learning process where two countries who really didn't engage with each other that much and basically approached each other.
I'm going to stop you there because finally the Prime Minister and the US President have arrived. Let's just listen into what they have.